Welcome one and all to another wonderful FastCast. I'm Amy Wren, the official reluctant Disney adult herself. FastCasts, as you may already know, or have already guessed, are, well, they're just podcasts. But with the Disney reference for a name, so it's all cool, right? But anyway, today we are starting an occasional type of FastCast called Amy at the Movies. Here, Amy, and perhaps an occasional special guest from time to time, will watch a movie and then talk about it. Today's movie is Disney's 2013 brand deposit historical drama, Saving Mr. Banks. I'll get to talking about the movie with you all soon. However, first, let's make sure we're all subscribed to the Reluctant Disney Adult. It's the best way to be sure you don't miss a single one of our FastCasts, our fun shorts, our currently running series of Amy on the Parks, videos about the Magic Kingdom, and some really great stuff that is in the works. If you have already subscribed, we thank you. If not, you know what to do. And don't forget to visit the Great Amy Ride, the official Patreon of the Reluctant Disney Adult. Paid members will get a whole lot of cool stuff, like exclusive videos and posts, early access to Reluctant Disney Adult videos, and the best way to get all the behind-the-scenes details of our work. And oh yeah, paid members get access to an exclusive Discord, where you get to hang out with me, the Reluctant Disney Adult, and also Cora, the Reluctant Disney Wife. And if you enjoy seeing and hearing your names, Premier members get shoutouts on all our videos and FastCasts. Go to patreon.com/The Great Amy Ride and never miss a thing. So now that we've done the obligatory pre-show, it's time for the fun. Sit back, secure your travel bag in the overhead compartment, and see what direction the wind's in. Is it in the east? Because it's time to talk about Saving Mr. Banks. Okay, Saving Mr. Banks. Let's start by just talking a little bit about exactly what this movie is. Saving Mr. Banks, as you may or may not know, is a 2013 biographical drama film. It's directed by John Lee Hancock, and it's written by Kelly Marcel and Sue Smith. The movie is, of course, about Walt Disney and P.L. Travers, and a conflict that, and we'll get into this, that didn't particularly happen in this way in real life, but it was dramatized into a movie because, P.L. Travers and Walt Disney are two very interesting characters, and butting them up against each other with their different sensibilities has a certain level of dramatic potential to it, for sure. And also, it's Disney propaganda ahead of, the 50th anniversary of Mary Poppins, which is, one of the most popular movies that Disney has ever released, one of its biggest hits, and something that was kind of looked at by Walt and others within the Disney company as signifying that Disney was something more than just, the kiddie cartoon company or, the amusement park peddlers. So, yeah, it's Disney propaganda. I think at some point Bob Iger referred to things like Saving Mr. Banks as brand deposits. I don't know if I've ever really found that. I remember that from the time period, but it does sound like something Bob Iger would say, and it definitely was something that was made in a specific way that is there to trumpet the Walt Disney Company by, using the image of Walt Disney, using the story of the making of Mary Poppins, even if it doesn't necessarily make the company look like sparkling clean. It's there to sell Disney as a company, to say, look, we're the same company that Walt Disney created, where we have that lineage with Walt Disney. We're bathed in the goodwill that the name of Walt Disney, even though, I mean, in this day and age, and for good reason, his name is much more complex, much more mixed in terms of the reputation that I think it has outside of people, who are just unobjectively just adore Disney in a way that does not look at the truth of not only the company, but Walt Disney himself. And we're going to take a look at how that propaganda element, that part of it that really feels kind of slimy and kind of shitty, and how it plays with some of the truth of, well, P.L. Travers and her relationship with the movie Mary Poppins. But it's also we're going to talk about the movie itself, which is this weird amalgamation of a story set in 1961 that is with the making of basically the finalization of the script before they take it to actually film it, and the conflict with P.L. Travers having her own concept of how Mary Poppins is, because I mean she wrote her and was very protective of Mary Poppins, and how Walt Disney viewed Mary Poppins, and how the Sherman Brothers approached it with their music, and how it was written, and all of that. And it's a big showpiece for Emma Thompson playing P.L. Travers, and of course Tom Hanks playing Walt Disney. Because, I mean, who the heck else is going to play Walt Disney but, Tom Hanks. But we'll get into all that. And that's coupled with these flashbacks to P.L. Travers' childhood in Australia. Which, I mean, if you've never looked into P.L. Travers' life, might be a surprise, because, there's always the image that the writer of Mary Poppins is this super English, super British woman, which is kind of the image that P.L. Travers tried to portray. I don't know if she ever really hid the fact that she grew up in Australia, but she certainly was not one to, focus on that fact. But anyway, it talks about that. It tries to make this connection with why she was so protective of Mary Poppins and not wanting it to be a very particular way, with a very turbulent childhood. And we're going to talk about that. And I'm going to say right off the bat about this movie, I have a very complex feeling about this movie, and the best way, I said it on my Letterboxd. I don't know if anyone listening to this follows my Letterboxd. It's not, don't worry about it. But I've said this before. I both love this movie and I hate this movie, and it all exists together because there's so much of this movie that works, and I love it just because it exists. It's so amazing to me that this thing exists. But it's also loathsome at this certain level. And it's indicative of some of the shittiness of the Bob Iger tenure, which in a lot of ways was an improvement, particularly at the end of the Eisner years. Which, I mean, if you're listening to this and you're not, 20 years old, there's a good chance that you remember Disney under Michael Eisner. How, we're not going to get into that whole story, but how the first decade was a whole lot of investment, the revitalization of the Disney animation studio, some big things with parks like the opening of Hollywood Studios, which at the time was Disney MGM Studios at Disney World, and of course the big beautiful park in France, which is of course Disneyland Paris now, but it was originally opened as Euro Disney, which became this gigantic millstone around Disney's plans throughout the rest of the 90s into the 2000s. And of course, how the Disney Renaissance was this big, wonderful thing, but it kind of fell apart in the back half of the 90s and then, led to some big flops, Treasure Planet and the likes. And just, they bought ABC and they had so many troubles with ABC. They kind of backed into Lost and Desperate Housewives and Pirates of the Caribbean, and they gave up on a bunch of other things that ended up being huge hits. And then, Animal Kingdom was fine, even though they cut a lot of corners, particularly with Disneyland USA. And then, of course, DCA, Disney's California Adventure, and the Studio Park in Paris just were... They weren't great parks. In large part because they were done bare bones. There was the park in Paris was a contractual obligation, and it looked like it. Just even today, they're trying to fix it and make it something better. Now that they're going to call it what, Adventureland or Adventure Park or whatever it is. Rather than, Studio Park, which didn't make any sense because at least Hollywood Studios was originally intended to be a live studio where they produced movies and television, and they did up into the early 2000s. I know I'm talking a lot about Michael Eisner here, who has almost nothing to do with this movie, if not nothing at all. But of course, Eisner was he tried to be a Walt Disney. Like, he put himself in all these promos and specials, like he was trying to be the big host. Kind of how, Walt Disney had his Uncle Walt persona, where he'd greet us on, well, not us, because I was not born for well over a decade and a half until, after Disney died. But he was this big presence on TV, and it was really just to sell the public on Disneyland and to promote Disney stuff so that, people would buy tickets to the movies and watch the TV shows and buy the merchandise and go to Disneyland, which was ultimately then, to promote his big idea, the Florida Project, which ultimately became Walt Disney World. That's a connector. But going back to Bob Iger, who was absolutely not that kind of person, he goes out of his way to not be on TV except for obligatory things. As the CEO of Disney, he clearly does not care on being, a screen presence, which means that we don't have anywhere near the countless examples of just completely awkward television that Michael Eisner gave us. Because that's not Bob Iger. Bob Iger is a much more cautious person. He's a much more... he's not about getting his name out there and being the center of attention, but he absolutely has no qualms about trading on Walt Disney's image, which is what this movie is doing. It is designed to say, look at Walt Disney, remember the positive feelings we all have about Uncle Walt and how he would comfort our parents, our grandparents, or us, depending on how old you are and who you are and what you remember. Every Sunday, it was a Sunday that the Walt Disney presents stuff happened when I was a kid. I'm pretty certain it was Sundays going back to the 50s. Whatever a day it was, he'd come on the TV and Tinkerbell would make him fly, or he would introduce Davy Crockett. He'd talk about Tomorrowland. He'd talk about Disneyland. He would talk about all this stuff. And he is, his name is the name of the company. He is still intertwined now, going on 60 years almost since he died. He is still this presence that is over the company. Certainly not as much as it was back in the 70s when they were all what would Walt do about it? But through the Eisner years, through the Iger years, and the Chapek Interregnum, and then Iger 2.0, he is still over everything. And of course, one reason why I wanted to talk about this movie was the animatronic show that debuted for the 70th anniversary of Disneyland, Walt Disney: A Magical Life, where they created an animatronic of Walt Disney in his office. He's got the big, it's from the Florida Project video, the last of the Uncle Walt performances that he did to sell the Florida Project. And they've got this animatronic show of him now that, for the time being, has replaced Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln. Eventually, they're going to alternate them or something. I don't remember exactly how all that's going to go. It doesn't really matter. But that's what really gave me the idea to go back and visit this, is that even today, they are trading off of Walt Disney's name to say, look, we are still connected to him. And this is all part of that. This is a big part of that. So we're going to take a quick break here, but then let's get back into it. Okay, we're back. We're talking about Saving Mr. Banks, of course. So we're already about a quarter of into the episode, and we've only talked a little bit about the movie. So let's get into the movie. Of course, Saving Mr. Banks, like we said, stars Tom Hanks as Walt Disney and Emma Thompson as P.L. Travers, who, of course, is the author of Mary Poppins. And, of course, their central relationship, their conflict, their butting of heads, the differences of their characters, is a big part of this movie. It's the central relationship, the central part of the movie is Walt trying to convince her to sign over the rights. Now, in real life, by the time that she was involved in reviewing the script and making her own requests and wishing to have changes made, uh, there was no question that the deal was signed. The deal was already signed. A movie was going to be going. And of course, it's never really mentioned in the movie, I don't think. But I mean, Disney had the rights. I mean, not only had the rights secured once she came to LA to help with the script, he had final cut. So as much as she might object to the animation and all of that, it didn't matter. He had final cut. That was going to happen. But obviously the movie kind of fudges that, and because I mean it's a movie, it's going to create drama. If like we already know that, then it's whatever. Also, during the time that she would have been in Burbank at Disney's studios and was doing the sessions where they were going through the script and she was listing her objections or approving of things, for most of that, if not all of it, Walt Disney was not at the studio. He was on a vacation, either intentionally to not be there when she was there, or it was just a trick of the scheduling. So most of this conflict, this relationship, them butting heads, is purely an artifact of drama. Whatever there might have been communication between the two of them would have been through letters or intermediaries. I don't know if they even had any phone calls. It didn't happen this way, which again, this is a dramatic conceit because this is, again, it's Disney propaganda. And we'll get into this a bit more later about how there's a specific way that I think Disney, and it's not unique to Disney, but I think Disney likes to do that somewhat with their history. It does it in this specific way, which is, it is not outright fabrication or to make them look perfect. It's a way of making them look like they're telling the truth, even when they're completely fudging details, by giving a little bit of the truth and making the story so that Disney does not look perfect in the situation. It's a specific way to propagandize, particularly for a company that Disney is really, really good at. And honestly, yeah, but we're going to get into that. Right now, I just want to talk about the casting. And I mean, like, if you think about, okay, there's a movie and Walt Disney is one of the two main characters. Who are we going to have playing Walt Disney? 9 out of 10 of you, 99 out of 100 of you, probably 999 out of 1,000 of you would say Tom Hanks. Now, Tom Hanks and Walt Disney, they don't have particularly a good resemblance, but I mean, I've never been one that when you're playing a historical character, that resemblance is necessarily the most important thing, as much as being able to convey the spirit of the person. And in that, Tom Hanks, again, it's all image versus reality, and in a lot of these cases, Tom Hanks, especially older Tom Hanks, who, when he made this film, was in his late 50s, wasn't that much younger than Walt was in 1961. He would have been 60. He would have been 59 throughout that movie. He wouldn't have turned 60 until December. But so he's a similar age, and he has the character that he convey. And Tom Hanks he's not a one note, but he has that personality that he can convey. Even though he's not from the Midwest, he was born in California, grew up pretty much in California, I believe. But he has a very Midwestern sensibility, just like Walt Disney, who was born in Illinois, born in Chicago, and then grew up in Marceline, Missouri, and Kansas City, and then was back in Chicago before he was fully out of high school. So he can convey that, and he's really good as Walt Disney, because he's got that whole Uncle Walt being the kind of comforting charm that Walt Disney would often convey in playing Uncle Walt. And he's not really doing Uncle Walt, because again, that's a character that he would put on for the TV cameras when he's trying to sell Disneyland, or Sleeping Beauty, or what have you, Davy Crockett. But he is doing a sales job with P.L. Travers, so he's trying to do what he does with everyone, trying to charm her, and it doesn't really work, because of course P.L. Travers in a lot of ways is an opposite of Walt Disney. Walt Disney has that kind of charming, nostalgic optimism, that looking in the past, but not the real past. He's trying to make his own past because his real past kind of sucked, kind of way. And he's also looking towards the future. He's got that cheery disposition about him, that optimism, kind of contradictory nature to him in a certain ways. But it butts up against this very exact properness that P.L. Travers is trying to convey. And, of course, Emma Thompson is cast as P.L. Travers, and she does a good job. Like, she really gets at that. And I don't know how much of, she's a good foil for Walt Disney, because she's not so susceptible to his charms as a whole lot of people would be. So it creates a interesting dynamic between the two of them. And I enjoy that central relationship. I enjoy the give and take. I enjoy the scene that's set at Disneyland, where they of course, using Disney's big asset is they can film scenes at Disneyland, and of course they have to cut it in a certain way, showing only places where, with, I don't know, good camera angles and people dressed the right way, and probably some CG, subtle CG changes, making it look like Disneyland in 1961 as opposed to Disneyland in 2012, 2013, whenever they were filming those scenes. So, I mean, they shot at the entrance right in front with the Mickey Mouse, and I don't know if it looks the same as, that may have been CG, that may have been specifically set up that way for the movie. They shot down Main Street to the castle, and then of course they showed them at the carousel, which again is one of the attractions that probably looks not too different as it did, and the angles, again, making sure that nothing that would have been there and wouldn't have been there in 1961 was shown. But it's a good scene. And it's the one place where it's clear that his charm is kind of working. Also, it works because, he's giving her news that they figured out a way to make the character of Mr. Banks not be so cruel. which I mean is again is part of the story. But no, she does a good job. Emma Thompson does a good job as PL Travers, who's of course intensely protective of her work, and again, kind of conveying what the movie wants to convey with her character, that she's intensely protective because the character, particularly of Mr. Banks, but also Mary Poppins, is related to, again, stuff that happened, like her dad dying when she was a child. And her family being kind of a wreck. And in the movie, it's her mom's sister is brought in. But again, we can talk about that when we talk about the flashback scenes. But no, it's good. And we'll talk about them more. But, I mean, the flashbacks, her parents are played by Colin Farrell and Ruth Wilson. Is that her name? Yeah, Ruth Wilson they both play Travers Robert Goff, her father, and Margaret Goff, her mother, respectively. It's 2013, so you're thinking, okay, we want two characters that are kind of, they're supporting characters that are plausibly brothers, that are kind of comedic characters, but not completely. And some of you almost have probably said, yeah, one of them is going to be Jason Schwartzman. One of you probably said BJ Novak. Of course, if you've seen the movie, you know that they both are playing the Sherman brothers. And of course, it's 2013, so there's a good chance as any that Bradley Whitford's in the movie, which he is. He's playing Don DeGrady, co-writer of Mary Poppins. And I guess for that kind of the bigger cast of recognizable actors, of course, Paul Giamatti is playing a character who's basically a composite character of the drivers that drove P.L. Travers around when she was in L.A. at Burbank, going over the script. So, I mean, that whole story was just kind of a fiction, a creation, to kind of give us a chance to see P.L. Travers in a situation where she's not kind of feeling back up against the wall, kind of protecting her Mary Poppins. So they create this whole thing with Paul Giamatti talking about his daughter who's in a wheelchair, and they have this whole relationship, and it's kind of schmaltzy. It kind of works for me just because, I mean, it's Emma Thompson and Paul Giamatti doing it. So the fact that you've got these great actors doing it makes it kind of work, but it doesn't, I don't know. I don't care for it that much. It's okay. But yeah, I mean, that's the cast. And yeah. Anyway, when we get back, I think I'm going to go into talking about the flashbacks, which, yes, we're going to talk about the flashbacks. And we're back with, of course, this FastCast about saving Mr. Banks. We're going to get into the flashbacks back in the around 1906, 1908, that area in Australia, where we get some context for P.L. Travers' childhood. But first, I just wanted to talk about the central relationship between Walt Disney and P.L. Travers in the movie. And it's pretty clear that both of them have a need for control. Control of the project or control of what they created. And they're both butting heads about it. And they have their own, needs or desires to convey, to be, which there's at one point a cutting line that is certainly put in there by someone who did their homework on Walt Disney, where P.L. Travers calls them kiddie cartoons or whatever. Because that's something that he has never been able to shake, is how he built Disney, the company, did Snow White and Fantasia and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and Disneyland. And he never was able really to escape the shadow of being the guy who made Mickey Mouse. And not that Mickey Mouse wasn't great and isn't great, but I mean, there was always that, he's not a real director, or he's not a real Hollywood elite, because he just makes cartoons. And I mean, that's what Mary Poppins was to him, was this big live action movie that could show that Disney could do more than just kiddie cartoons. That he wanted to have this, legitimate Oscar contender, and like this legitimate movie that would be beyond just something that you plop kids in front of. And then, of course, P.L. Travers' side is Mary Poppins was the one thing she created that, people really loved. And it meant a lot to her. And it means a lot to her in the movie. And she doesn't want to give it up to turn it into something that she doesn't want. It's a lot like, Bill Watterson with Calvin and Hobbes. And of course, he's been very successful at it. But I assume because, he's not in a position where the money is kind of necessary, which is a whole thing in this movie. The P.L. Travers really only considered this because she kind of needed the money from selling the rights. And I mean, I understand it. Like, that's one reason Bill Watterson didn't want to see Calvin and Hobbes get turned into, I don't know, some half-assed Saturday morning TV show, and certainly didn't want to see it turned into what would happen if and when he dies and those rights become available, that it will be some mediocre Illuminations movie. She was very protective of that. And I mean, she's derisive to the point of kind of cartoonishness, honestly, of Walt Disney, which again is something that he's had to put up with so many people throughout his lifetime. It's just a constant refrain. But yeah, and I mean, that's all setting up, which we'll get there once we talk about the flashbacks. Which the flashbacks have this feel like, I don't know if this was true, that at some point there was just going to be a biographical movie about P.L. Travers' childhood, because it feels kind of like a separate movie that was cut up and turned into flashbacks for this movie about Walt Disney and P.L. Travers. And it doesn't pull a lot of punches, fewer punches than you'd think, that a John Lee Hancock movie uh, that he made for Disney would have. Like, I mean, Colin Farrell's just a complete mess of an alcoholic, as also he fosters Helen, which of course is P.L. Travers's her name, and of course he calls her Ginty. That's the nickname that he has given her. And he's kind of like, he's an alcoholic. It's clear that he's kind of self-medicating because of the frustrations of the world. He can't do whatever he wants to do. He's a banker, and it's definitely causing problems for the family. Like, it's kind of, you don't know this for sure, but you know that they're moving to this new town that's like out in the middle of nowhere, because that's kind of the last chance he has as a bank president, a bank official. And of course he's also sick and eventually dies. There's a whole thing where it's silly, so silly towards the beginning when there's pears. Like, she gets into her hotel once she's in Southern California, and there's pears in like fruit baskets. And she says, I specifically said no pears. And she opens the window and throws the pears out into the pool. And it's just this silly scene. And it's kind of redeemed by the context of how pears she was getting pears for her father. And when she came back, her father was dead. There's a whole nother part where her mom just completely dissociates and walks into a pond as she's there. And of course she wakes up in the middle of it, like Helen P.L. Travers as a child goes after her, and she snaps out of it. Which, these things happen. They didn't happen quite in that sequence. Like, her mom had her break down, and the claimed inspiration for Mary Poppins came into their family's lives, kind of like how that was, but it was after P.L. Travers' dad, Travers Goff, died. That happened. They kind of jiggered with the timeline, so that it happened before he died. And I don't know. It goes to some places that you wouldn't expect a Disney movie to go to. There's some inventive stuff done with some camera stuff in ways, again, that I wouldn't have expected from a movie from this time period. But it's also that they didn't really cheap out on maybe the cast so much, but they definitely did not film in Australia. Like, you can tell that it was filmed in Southern California, the Australia scenes. And it was almost certainly cheaper. I don't even think they filmed anything. They may have filmed like one or two shots, but I don't even think they even did that. There's a lot of practical shots, so I don't know where if they set up sets or they were just using existing sets and just dressed them up so that they looked more maybe Australian than they did, southwestern United States. But, like, the scenes work. Like, Ruth Wilson is doing an excellent job as her mom. You can kind of feel how she just is not handling this very well. Colin Farrell's Colin Farrell. He's fine. He's good in the role. The little actress who played Helen, I forget her name. let's see here. I'm looking it up on Wikipedia because I don't have this like at I had it up, but I had to go back into it. The actress's name was Annie Rose Buckley. Was playing P.L. Travers as a 7-year-old. And like she does a good job. I mean, she's just old enough at 7 that she's starting to have kind of a understanding of the mess that her parents are involved in and what's going on with them, but she doesn't have any of the context in that. So she's not like her younger sister who is completely oblivious to it, really. But she's at that age where this stuff is going on and you're going to internalize it and think that it's your fault that it's happening, especially if you're not corrected by your parents that that's the truth. So like it works, but it's also so directly tied into different specific moments in the 1961 scenes that I don't know if I hate them or I think they work. Maybe both. There's this whole part where they're going over the words from, I don't know, the song that the banker sings in Mary Poppins. And she's flashing back at that moment to her father giving that speech with the same kind of edge to it of bankers, am I right? And I think it's just kind of conveying how that's triggering her flashback. Not so much that he was saying these exact words, which I don't know. I've never read Mary Poppins. I don't know if like that comes from the book or if it's just the words from the script and it's the scene, the context of it is triggering this flashback for her. And if it's the latter, I think it works better. But if it's the former, and it's possibly the former, it just kind of feels cheesy. So I don't know. Like it's too tidy. There's too much tidiness with the flashbacks. In a way that's saying, oh, that explains that more so than, oh, this is making her flashback. And it's causing her to, because it's so intertwined with her childhood memories and this story means so much to her because it's so intertwined with those feelings. And of course, that's all just setting up the big blowout that they have. There's obviously going to be conflict. Like we're moving towards this thing where it looks like P.L. Travers and Walt Disney have come to some form of agreement and everything's running swimmingly. And then she finds out about the Jolly Holiday animated penguins. And there's a fight over that because she hates the idea of animation, wants nothing to do with animation in the movie. But of course, the animated penguins are that sequence. They like have the live action Mary Poppins and the kids and Bert, Dick Van Dyke. I always forget the character's name is Bert. I always just call him Dick Van Dyke. And I'm assuming I'm not the only one who does that. And there's that blowout. She decides to go home. And of course in the movie, the rights haven't been signed. So it's this big thing where Walt Disney flies to England. And we set up that scene. And we'll get into that in the final part of this FastCast. All right. Welcome back to the Saving Mr. Banks episode of this FastCast. Amy Goes to the Movies. I think that's what we're calling it. But yeah, saving Mr. Banks. We've gone through the flashbacks and kind of the the conflict between Walt Disney and PL Travers, and now we're at the big moment when Walt Disney goes to England, to London, to have tea and whiskey with PL Travers and convince her to sign the papers. And this is, of course, where we get a version of Walt's childhood story about being, a paper boy in Kansas City and, working for his dad. And of course, it's all set up to connect Walt Disney's childhood and his stuff that he brings to everything he does. That horrible story about being a kid, having to get up so dang early and deliver papers, no matter what the conditions were. Even as, it's so cold, the skin is peeling off of his face, and the snow is seeping into his feet, and the snow is so deep that he's falling into it. And then he'd go to school, and he was tired because he delivered papers in the morning, and of course they delivered, this is the 19 teens, so he's delivering not only a morning edition but an evening edition. So he'd get home after school, and he and his brother would, his mom would serve them their dinner, and they would go out and do the same exact thing with the evening edition. Which of course is a big part of his story. I don't have any reason to believe that it's not true. The movie fudges it a bit, says that he was doing it when he was 8, which, his family, I don't believe, moved to Kansas City until he was 9 or 10. No, it was 9 or 10. So they fudged it a bit. But, it's a big part of his story. And how he certainly had a complicated relationship with his father, who, owned the newspaper delivery business, and rather than, hiring people to deliver the newspapers, had his sons do it. Him and, I think, Roy Disney. And, again, it's meant to connect, he realized. Again, they use a whole thing where he didn't realize that P.L. Travers was not her legal name, that her legal name was Helen Goff, and that Travers was her father's name. And that's supposed to be, in the movie, is him coming to the realization that, of course, she's so protective of Mr. Banks and that whole part of it, because Mr. Banks is Travers Goff. It's her father. And he wants to connect with her on that level. Whereas before, he's trying to connect with her on the way he usually does with people that he gets rights for or whatever. But there, he's trying to connect with her. And so he uses that story. And what he's trying to explain about how what he does, Main Street USA, and that nostalgia, but it's looking forward. It's built on him building his own, I want to say reality, and that's going to be choked through with meaning because of all the bullshit around us. People who say that crap, going back to Karl Rove and all the other right-wing nut jobs. Hey, Walt Disney wasn't exactly not right-wing, but he wasn't really in the way that the fascists of today are. And he tries to connect that. And it's a really good scene because, Tom Hanks is a good actor and he can convey the feeling that is generated by Walt when he's remembering this time in his life, remembering his father, who again he has a complicated relationship with, that isn't it isn't not because of the guilt he feels about, buying his father and mother a new house, him and Roy, when, they made it big with Disney. And, the house having a heating system that started leaking carbon monoxide, I think, and killed his mom and almost killed his dad. So there's that element involved with all of that. But again, he's trying to connect that he didn't pull this out of his ass. This is him doing something that in honor of his father, that Mr. Banks is he sees his father in Mr. Banks, just like P.L. Travers sees her father in Mr. Banks. And, again, it's a good scene, like I said, because Emma Thompson's good reacting to him, and Tom Hanks is good at conveying the complex emotions, and also conveying that as much as this is genuine, it is also a complete and total sales job. He is trying to sell, trying to get her to sign that piece of paper. And throughout it, you can tell this. This is what he's conveying. That as genuine as Walt may be in that moment, he is also trying to get across the finish line. He is trying to get her assent so they can make this movie. And then, of course, she agrees, and then we get the scene where they weren't going to invite her, and again, they kind of fictionalize that she talks directly to Walt to get the invitation to the Hollywood premiere, when she did make a stink about it, but it was justifiably so, in my opinion. But it was not someone as high up in Disney's hierarchy as Walt himself. It was just one of the more junior executives in the company. And then, of course, they show the premiere. And they make it... they don't, necessarily fudge that she wasn't pleased with elements of the movie. But they also make her won over by different elements of the movie, even though that's not what she says explicitly. And, it's a whole thing where, P.L. Travers certainly did not want rights. She never assented to giving Disney rights to anything beyond the first Mary Poppins story, and of course all the other Mary Poppins stories, to the extent that her will explicitly stated you cannot give rights to anything for American companies. So there's certainly a feeling that Walt Disney maybe kind of screwed her over, and there's not without justification for feeling that way. But P.L. Travers was a very complicated woman in her own right, who was contradictory and may have said things contradictory, may have liked the movie more than she let on, may have not liked it at all. She was never quite concrete and was very flexible in what she chose to portray and believe throughout her life. But that's the movie. And like I said, I love this movie in so many ways, but I really hate this movie in other ways because it just... As a movie, it mostly works, and I like it, and I'm just so glad that something like this exists, because I don't know. I just like this kind of stuff. But at the same time, this is clear Disney propaganda. And again, I mean, every company, every organization, whatever, engages in propaganda. There's nothing wrong with propaganda in and of itself. But there's a specific way that Disney does this, and they're very good at this. And I'm blanking on any examples right at this moment. But a lot of their narrative, a lot of the stuff that they've agreed to have created. Like there's a book written by Works' granddaughter about the Imagineers that is coming to mind. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on her name. I just know that she's Works' granddaughter, and she also did a Pixar documentary about the time that Disney bought Pixar. That there's a specific way that this kind of propaganda is done, where it's not like it's a complete whitewashing of the story. There's enough truth, and it's told in a way that doesn't necessarily exonerate the company or the person that the propaganda is for. That shows some truth. That shows you some truth and accepts, hey, we were maybe wrong about this, or we were kind of shitty. And that's what this movie does. But it also does it in a way that it's saying, but on the whole, we were great. And it's right. And this is the way it absolutely should be. And again, this isn't just talking about like trying to prop up Walt Disney and Disney, the company, in the moment in the 1960s, in the production of Mary Poppins. This is connecting that time period, Walt Disney himself, and Mary Poppins, the creation of Mary Poppins, which again is one of the best movies that Disney made. It is one of the best things that Disney has ever done. And they're trying to connect that movie and that person, that Walt Disney, and say, we are like Mary Poppins. We are like Walt Disney. And of course, it's not the first time that the company, after Walt Disney's death, has used Walt Disney as a way of selling the company in the moment. And it's certainly not the last time. Again, I should point to the animatronic show at Disneyland that is currently playing. Like, you can go there right now, and I believe, and wait in line or virtual queue or whatever's going on with it, and watch an animatronic Walt say basically great moments with Walt Disney. And honestly, how I feel about this movie is kind of honestly how I feel about Disney as a company. Like, there are obviously things that they have created, things that they run, that I love dearly. I wouldn't talk about this crap so much if I didn't love it. But Disney is a company like most others, and they are different. Honestly, they are the last independent studio in Hollywood. Every one of the others are either owned by a bigger conglomerate or, in the case of 20th Century Studios, owned by Disney. So they are different, but they're not different. And they are just as guilty of the same bullshit that so many companies, and even if they're not on the level of the super fascists in Silicon Valley, the cyber Calvinists and the techno-feudalists that all worship the words of Curtis Yarvin, they still are shitty. They've been... Bob Iger was a big part of the drive to screw over the writers and the actors during the most recent strike. He's made a lot of choices that have messed with things at Disney. He's made a lot of good choices too. But like I said, the company is just a company. It does good things. It's created good things. It's still creating good things. But it also is shitty in its own ways and insidious at times even. And to deny the former is just as wrong in my mind as denying the latter. But I'm not going to sit here and say that I don't have this complicated relationship with Disney. And this movie conveys that complication. And yeah, that's Saving Mr. Banks. This was going to be a video at one point that was kind of tiring it into Iger's tenure, both his original tenure and his second one now picking up for JPEG. It never materialized because I couldn't quite get it to be something that was worth like a 30-minute, hour-long, 90-minute video. But, I mean, I guess technically this is a little longer than an hour, just talking about it, but that's Saving Mr. Banks. And that's the FastCast. All right, that just about wraps it up for us here. Please remember to like this episode, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Oh, and also please check out our Patreon at patreon.com/The Great Amy Ride. As always, we thank you for watching and listening and making the reluctant Disney adults so great.